I'd like to thank the staff for setting the cocktail reception up for us in a very nice location just across the road. Sorry for those who couldn't make it, and particularly, of course, our colleagues who are online. I don't see them at the moment, but hopefully. Do we have anyone online? Because we can't see them here. How are we doing, Michelle? Oh, there we are. No problem. So who do we have? We've got Rick. Rish. Ashley. Okay, so welcome back. And so we got I think a very interesting day. We got some very important topics to cover, and I know based on yesterday's contributions from everyone who participated and had lots of very, very insightful comments and views, which I know the two chairs and their teams were very appreciative of. I reminded them it was only day one of the first meeting of the SAC, so I didn't want to manage their expectations, but I think it would be fair to say we certainly met, if not exceeded, their expectations. So thank you very much for that, and we'll do so again today. So we're going to start with a breakout session to talk about firm culture and governance. And we've been put into groups, and we've got some questions which we will come back with some responses for. I think there's one common question, if I'm not mistaken, Geoff, and then some specific questions for each of the three teams. We want to do that for two reasons. One, to actually get us into smaller groups so we can get to know each other even better than we have done so far. But also, this is such an important topic that it would be best served if we did break into groups and then reconvene later on. And I'm sure it won't be the end of the discussion, Gabriella. This is an important topic which will be on your agenda for quite some time, if I'm not mistaken. So with that, let me hand over to Geoff, Ken, and Carla, or should I say Carla, Geoff, and Ken. Over to you.
Thank you, Alan, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for all your participation and contribution yesterday. Glad that you all came back for day two, so thank you very much. So today we have a few other topics that we want to walk through with you, and the first one, of course, is on firm culture and governance. It is a new IESBA initiative, which we have commenced in Q1 2024. So if I can move to the next slide, we're just gonna, as Alan said, we want to have some breakout sessions into three different groups. But we want to just give you a bit of an overview of this particular work stream and initiative, give you some contextual information and what the board have heard so far, and also perhaps what some of the working groups, what the working group has been up to in terms of some of the activities they have undertaken in Q1, and then we'll break out, and we want to perhaps get some feedback from you as well in terms of overall what you think of this initiative, your views and your reactions, and then we'll kick into the breakout groups after that. So perhaps if I can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Just some broad background, just for your information. Some of you might know already. It is, of course, an issue that was raised as we developed our strategy and work plan 2024 to 27 last year, when we got the feedback back from our consultation paper. And of course, Gabriella had already walked through with you what we have in our SWP. And so this was one of the key areas of focus that the board has identified. The board certainly felt that it is important to recognize the impact the culture of an accounting or audit firm and its governance structures in terms of its impact on ethical behavior and how that might impact not only reputation of firms, but certainly reputation of the accounting profession as a whole. And the board certainly felt that as a global standard setter on ethics and independence, it is important that we have a voice out there. So, for instance, last year in July, we published a statement on the importance, affirming the importance of ethical behavior by professional accountants. And the board agreed that the topic of firm culture and governance should be an area of strategic focus, and therefore to actually have put as a priority. And therefore, we have started a new work stream this year on that topic, and we have established a working group towards the end of last year as we approved the SWP. So without telling you the names of who is in the working group, just to let you know that we have a chair who is from the Australian NSS. So we have an NSS representation. We have another board member who is from one of the big four firms. So we have a firm representation. And also we have a board member who is an academic and another board member who is very much involved in the corporate governance sort of community. So it's quite broadly and it's a very diverse representation, and it's by design, of course, because it is a very, very broad topic, and we need all those different skill sets and experience for us to navigate our way through this very broad topic. So I just want to, without going into details of the terms of reference, the board approved the terms of reference in December last year. And here's some of the objectives that on the screen that we also sent to you as part of the presentation. The first thing is about gathering understanding of culture, or ethics culture rather, not all culture, but ethics culture and governance and the impact on compliance with ethics and independence requirements. I think and also including network firms as appropriate. The key points here is that we are not just looking at audit side of the business. There is quite a bit of work out there. Of course, the UK FRC has an audit firm governance code. I understand Japan has one as well, and other jurisdictions might also have something similar, focusing perhaps on audit quality. This is not what this work stream is about. It's broader than that. We are looking at whole of firm culture. We're looking at whole of firm activities and not just the audit side of the business. We're looking at the consulting arm of a firm. We're looking at, for instance, tax, all the different main business of a firm and the entire firm essentially. So it's very important to understand that, because even when we talk to people often, they would say, well, the audit failures and this and that. We're not just looking at audit. I think another point for us as a starting point, we don't think that all ethics failures within a firm can be attributed to a failure in the culture or failure in the governance system. So it's important that we recognize that, and that's why we're doing the information gathering at this stage, and then just trying to gain a better understanding of the connectivity between all these different concepts and terms and ideas. So we're very much at point number one there. And of course, we need to review what is currently in our extant code. For those of you who are familiar with our code or not familiar with our code, we do have a few paragraphs focusing on organizational culture, focusing on leadership, but there's not a lot in there. So we, as part of our exercise, of course, we will look at, once we get a better understanding, a proper understanding of what the issues are when it comes to firm culture or whole of firm culture and whole of firm governance, then we will look at, what's in our code and whether there's any gaps in our code that perhaps, or anything that we could look at as a board, do in terms of enhancing the code. But of course, there's a whole lot of other things that we could do as a board. And we're not saying that we're definitely gonna, add a section to the code, add a new part to the code. We're just saying that we will do the evaluation, of course, as part of the working group's activities. Another key action items that we're doing as part of the working group and more broadly as part of the board is continue to raise awareness of the importance of ethical behavior and the importance of governance and ethical culture within firms. Of course, the profession has a responsibility to act in the public interest. And so it's really important that we continue to stress that as a board, not just part of the working group, but as a board, we continue to stress that and really promote the importance of ethics, of ethical behavior by the profession and for those who use our code. And then we are planning to develop, of course, at the end of the working group's activities, a report with recommendations to the IESBA. We are hoping that we will at least have some recommendations and findings to the board towards the end of the year. Sounds like a lot of time. We're in May, but there's actually quite a bit that we have to do. So the working group and the staff are, going as fast as they can. But with that, we don't want to, we want to do it properly as well and have proper conversations with different stakeholders because it is quite important and it is a very broad topic. So with all this is, of course, coordination with our sister board, IESBA, is a very important component in all our key activities and key projects. And no difference with this one, particularly in terms of the connectivity with ISQM1, of course. So we will engage them very soon, in fact, and really get them involved and get their views on ISQM1 and how it's impacting the firm and maybe certainly with ISQM1's objectives, but we all want to understand how it's impacting the firm as a whole as well, because that is our broader objective of this particular work stream. We can move to the next slide, please, Michelle. So here's some of the approach. Well, the approach of the working group, of course, is I think is pretty logical. Gather information and understand the issues and identify possible solutions, of course. So in terms of gathering information, we are doing a fair amount of research and looking at case studies as well. And we are talking to the firms, talking to other stakeholders, regulators, and doing a lot of outreaches as well. And of course, we have the SAC meeting. We are looking forward to hearing your feedback very shortly. We have the National Standard Setter meeting in the next few days as well. So we'll hear from them as well. But in terms of information gathering, we have a few streams of information that we're getting, our understanding from. First, we have engaged an academic to do some academic research for us. As you would appreciate, and many of you would know, culture or organizational culture is a very broad topic. There's a lot of studies out there. So we felt that it's a good approach, it's a right approach rather, to engage an academic to do some initial research for us, but perhaps have a focus on firms or accounting audit firms, not just everything on that broad or all organizations, or a bigger focus on professional services firms. So we're doing that on the research side or academic studies. We are doing some case studies, more on recent cases. We've done some in March, and some of these are a little bit older. So we're now sort of zeroing in on perhaps more recent cases that we could find in different jurisdictions. And of course, in terms of outreach, for instance, last week, Carla and I and our working group chair, Chana Vijian, board member, we were in Singapore last week, and we did a fair amount of outreach and meetings with some of the firms over there, but also with the Asian audit regulators. So we met with ACRA and some of the other regulators from the region, as well from Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, maybe one or two others. So just starting to get that feedback from them in terms of outreach, and we'll reach out to many of you. I think I heard one comment that or a couple of comments yesterday that we shouldn't just talk to the SAC during meetings. I think we need to have the flexibility and perhaps the liberty to really reach out to our SAC members, because you all represent different sector, different stakeholders, and we would, Carla and myself will reach out to you in the coming weeks, I would say, and perhaps to organize some catch up with you and your constituents, and to get information. And as you've heard yesterday, sometimes it is a little bit hard for us to get feedback, particularly from the investors world, those chartered governance. And so that's something that we feel that certainly this group, the SAC can give us a lot of input. And then we're going to, of course, we need to understand the issues and the concepts, the relationship between the different concepts. So for instance, when we look at culture, immediately people think tone at the top or governance, a few others, rewards, speak up culture, for instance. But we want to take a closer look at the relationship of some of these concepts. Is culture, is governance driving culture, or is culture also impacting governance, for instance? So we want to have a better understanding of some of these concepts and the interrelationships between these concepts and common characteristics. And then we will look at, as I mentioned earlier, looking at what is in our code and whether we feel that in terms of possible solutions that this board can action on, whether it's revising the standard or strengthening the code, whether there's producing thought leadership material, non-authoritative guidance material. So all those options are on the table for us right now. And of course, as part of this, we feel that we are not the only player. And firms, I would say they are doing a lot of things already. And of course, there's a regulators community as well. And everybody has a role to play. And so we'll continue as part of this exercise to work with our different stakeholders. And so hopefully we will have some recommendations that will help as part of our role as a national, as a global standard setter on ethics and independence, to really help to build that public trust, in the work of the accountancy profession. So it's just an overview of the actual work stream itself. Now, Carla's going to, in a minute, just give you a sense of some of the things that we've heard at the March board meeting. And and the first question relates to that. But before I do that, I just want to see whether Gabriella or Ken have any additional thoughts or comments before I pass it to Carla.
Thank you very much, Geoff. Very good morning to all of you. Very briefly, because Geoff made already a very good presentation about our approach to this project. I'd just like to add one or two things. First, of course, our expectations are relevant with respect to the results of this work, as well as the expectations of our stakeholders. The expectations are different from what we could see until now. Since the last board meeting, and what Carla is going to present is mostly the result of the presentations that we had at that board meeting, topics that were identified as possible topics for attention. But after that, all the outreach meetings that we have been having in Canada, Japan, with the monitoring group, with the PIOB, etc., made us progress in terms of which topics may be under our attention and which are the ones which may raise more concerns or which are more promising. So this is to tell you that this is an evolving thing. Every day, I think that we are learning a little bit more, we are understanding a little bit more, and our stakeholders are bringing us a lot of input mostly in terms of the questions that they are addressing to us. What I can tell is that this is raising a lot of attention from all groups of stakeholders with different approaches, I must say. Regulators and profession and etc. They are all looking at this work stream and asking themselves what's going to happen after this first year of the sponge phase, as I was saying yesterday. We don't know. We don't have an answer today, and it's. I will ask for your understanding that it would be very risky at this point in time to tell you we are going to do this and that. We are going to develop a standard setting project here and there, or change the code, or whatever. It's too early days. And even if I'm famous for always being rushed and wanting things to happen very fast, I think that there is a risk here if we go too fast, because we really need to identify which are the most relevant topics on which the IESBA should work, and understand what we as an ethics standards board can and should do. We can't boil the ocean. Of course, we are not going to change the world, and we have to have that very clear. But it is our conviction that as an ethics standards board, we have something to do in this space. We are concerned. We are looking for the reasons for some unethical behaviors or happenings or events or whatever. We have regulations in place, we have standards, audit standards, assurance standards, ethics standards, but still things happen. So it is our conviction, and our stakeholders are confirming this conviction, that there may be something in the firm culture and governance space which opens room or creates incentives for these less appropriate behaviors. That's what we are going to try to identify, where these problems may come from, and after having identified those possible sources of problems, what we can do, because I'm not saying that the IESBA can fix everything or should fix everything. So this is just a little bit to temper the expectations. We don't want, of course, to frustrate the expectations, because our own expectations and ambitions are very high. But of course, we need to go in a very careful way and listen to everybody. The way we progressed and evolved in terms of our thinking since March board meeting until end of April shows how important this phase is. Listen to everybody, process the information. So your input here and these breakout groups that Alan Johnson has suggested to set are extremely important for us. The feedback of the SAC will be critical to help us define the direction and understand the issues on which we should be paying attention. So back to you, Geoff. Thank you very much.
Well, Ken, did you want to add anything?
Maybe very briefly, Geoff, and I think a lot has been said already in terms of introduction and context. The context, I think everybody's clear. It's a persistence of unethical behavior. We have seen a number of high-profile cases in the news headlines. I think this is a beginning of a journey in terms of the conversation we will be having with the SAC over the coming months, maybe over the coming couple of years as we dig deeper into this work stream. To my mind, this is an opportunity to reset expectations. Expectations in terms of the behaviors we would expect, in particular professional accountants operating in public practice in the firms, relative to the standards that IESBA sets. And we have to really have that very clear in our mind, that this is really what we want to achieve. You know, we have a body of standards that clearly we spend a lot of time and effort developing. It is not a book that we just put on the shelf. It is intended to be a book that guides the behaviors, the mindsets of the accountants who have a very lofty goal and a very lofty expectation on their shoulders, and that is to act in the public interest. And that's what we want to achieve. And I would say it is very multidimensional, and we will explore those different dimensions as we go forward within the firms themselves, looking at the hierarchies, looking at the policies and methodologies and procedures and protocols, looking at the externalities that weigh in, the pressures, incentives, the client engagements, etc., and the different factors that play a role as well. So there's a lot for us to learn. I think as I look around the table, one way or another, most of you have exposures to or engagements with the firms. So whatever experiences, whatever sort of lessons you've learned as you've engaged, as you've interacted with the firms, would be very useful to us. So this is very much a learning curve, but the goal is very clear in our mind. It is, as I said, to reset expectations, to make it very clear that those standards are intended to be lived within the profession as individual accountants carry out their sort of activities and professional services. Thank you.
If I still may, 30 seconds just to say the following. We don't know what will happen after this first year. The working group will make draft a report and suggestions to the IESBA, so we will see. This can end up being a project to develop standards, 3 projects, no project at all. We are not committing with anything, but one thing is sure, apart from and alongside with any project or more concrete work that we may want to do after this first phase, one thing that is for us very clearly very important is the discussion that is being launched on the topic. Even the fact that we are creating with you and with our stakeholders the opportunity to discuss this topic of firm culture and governance and reflect on the topic per se, I think it can be a very important contribution to the developments and the evolution in terms of ethical behaviors in this space. So we also want to be and to create a platform for discussion. And this group, I was speaking about the contribution that you can give us. And of course, we are very much looking forward to have it. But it's also a way of having each one of the members going back home on to your institutions or organizations with some ideas in mind that you can spread outside. And this is something which will not be very visible or measurable, but that we also want to help fostering, developing, etc.
Thank you, Gabriela and Ken. So before I pass it to Carla to give you a bit of a sense of some of the things of what we've heard. Actually, I will pass to Carla now. We'll keep it fairly short just to get a few kind of key points just to get your thinking juice going, and then we'll break into the breakout group straight away.
Thank you, Geoff. Michelle, next slide, please. I'm excited for the next section because it's a two-way relationship. We can't wait to hear from you. It's very important to get your input into the questions we have. It's challenging because I have 2 minutes to run through these few points to give you an idea before we send you off to the breakout rooms and answer those questions for us. To give you a bit of background, we've been deliberate in coming up with those questions. The working group went through a journey of fact-finding, doing desktop research, speaking to various stakeholders. We had several questions we posed to the stakeholders when we were in Singapore last week in terms of various groups that we met with. And we came about with the questions we're proposing to you today, hopefully to get some of your insight into the issues we're trying to deal with. The next 2 slides you see in front of you, the points are not interrelated at the moment. As Gabriel mentioned, we are at the absorbing stage where we're listening to stakeholders and the points that they're raising. But perhaps to give you a flavor in terms of some of these areas that was brought up, I'd like to tell a story. And it's some of it came about from Jeremy Hirschhorn, who's the second commissioner at Australia who presented to the IESBA at the March meeting. It started off with a firm in a regular industry such as the audit industry that's very regulated. And then it grew and it employed a consulting arm and grew and grew and grew. And that consulting arm is under the purview of the accounting firm, which we know do adopt the code of ethics. But the question is, sometimes not all of them are very intimate with the code of ethics. For example, if we were to ask, who is the true client? And maybe some of you know, some of you don't. Paragraph 101 of our Code of Ethics on page 19 says, a distinguishing mark of the accountancy profession is the acceptance of responsibility to act in the public interest. I'd like to inquire how many non-professionals out there actually do truly understand of the sentence that's in the code. So that begs the question, whose interests are they representing? It is a question that we will not be able to answer via this project itself. However, it will come up as we are looking into firm culture and governance. And one of the other questions that came about is when these firms grew, it became apparent some of the rainmakers was taking reign at the top. So is that issue that it became a profit-driven entity? Was the incentive program in place to encourage such a behavior? At this stage, we're not pointing fingers. The apple tree, it's a large tree with many branches. There's bound to be one bad apple, but we believe that firms inherently do set out to be good ethical enterprises working on the behalf of the public interest. Another thing that we found in conversation with our stakeholders, Michelle, next slide, please, is whether there's appropriate transparency mechanism in place. An example, just to give you a flavor, Big Four in Australia has a organization in place where they are not required to provide financial statements or provide information on numeration. This is not the case in every jurisdiction. So that begs the question whether there is a transparency mechanism that's appropriately available in each jurisdiction to encourage an ethical behavior within the system. So with that in mind, I'd like to invite you to break out into your groups. Group 1 will remain in this room, group 2 and 3 in level 6. And have a great discussion. We'll see you back in an hour. Thank you.
Before we break, can I just ask, how do we cater for our colleagues who are online? Are they going to be,
Yes,
they're
we have,
on the list? You've got the technology to bring them in, do you?
yes, we provided the Zoom invite. So
Okay,
hopefully you have
thanks.
received them.
And if there are any others who I see, for example, Paul Mont is not, I don't see is on the list, but he is free to join
Yes.
whichever.
They're welcome to
wish
stay
to.
in the main boardroom just
Okay.
because of the space limitation
Okay.
in the other
Just
rooms.
thought I should, right, thanks. Dwayne.
Thank you. One scoping question. When we're thinking about this discussion, I think you guys have really honed in on the firms as opposed to PAs more generally, PAIBs, in business, et cetera. And I know the memo talked at the beginning about corporate failure. So I was just curious, have you kind of narrowed down your scope to how firms are acting and auditing and other service providing, as opposed to ethics of other professional accountants that drive business failures or whatever it might be through fraud or otherwise?
Thank you, Dwayne, for that question. In terms of the scope of this initiative, essentially it is focusing on accounting audit firms, so your Big Fours and some of the other firms, and not your PAIBs in, say, CFO roles or other senior roles that perhaps because of their unethical behavior or unethical culture that they perhaps help create in organizations. So that's the focus. But of course, as you have heard from Gabriella yesterday, we are looking at extending the impact of the code, and we'll have a session a bit later. But that's something, a bit later. Thank you for that. And if you have any more questions about these, Ken and myself and Carla will be able to give you a little bit more context as we go into the breakout groups. So Ellen, would that be okay if we move everyone in?